So new research finds that mimicry might be the best way to get someone to like you, especially if you do it right after they do it and not make it so obvious. Mimicry, or social imitation, might be one of the easiest ways to quickly get someone to like you, and it might even be a really powerful tool for social manipulation. But before we get into its more devious applications, let's first talk about some of the basic social functions of mimicry. Humans, it turns out, are born mimickers. We tend to mimic almost everybody that we see, and this starts very early in life. So studies show that if you take a 1-month-old infant, and you got to get your face kind of close to theirs because at that point their vision isn't that great, but if you put your face right in front of theirs, they tend to mimic your exact facial expression. So a really cute example of this was a study where they had people either make a very open face, a pinched face, or with their tongue protruding. So in this study, they found that about 40 to 50% of the time, if you had a little infant in your arms, the little infant would look up, you can go, or if you stuck your tongue out, the infant would stick their tongue out at you. And this is just automatic mimicry. It has something to do with what we call mirror neurons. So this was a somewhat recent discovery that was first found in chimpanzees, but it turns out we have them as well, and probably lots of other social animals. So that when we see someone acting, like for example, if your friend sees you and they wave hello, you seeing that, your part of your brain is going to activate in the same way as if you were raising your hand and saying hello as well. Now, for us adults, we don't automatically mimic other people because we have other areas of our brain, like our prefrontal cortex, that is going to inhibit our mirror neurons from actually taking over our body and, for example, raising our arm when we see someone else doing it. But for babies, they don't have a lot of frontal lobe development yet, so their mirror neurons act very directly, just causing whatever expression is on someone else's face on their own face. So one of the research studies that first looked at this was by Chartrand and Barge back in 1999, and they just wanted to see how automatic is mimicry. How much do people do it without even realizing it? So what they had is a couple of Confederates come in and interact with participants in a getting to know you exercise. In one of the conditions, the Confederates were told to act normally, but to, throughout the interaction, shake their foot. In another condition, Confederates were told to, instead of shaking their foot, to scratch their face or rub their face in some way throughout the interaction. And what they found was that when participants were talking to the foot-shaking Confederate, they also tended to shake their foot a lot more than in control conditions. Whereas if participants were talking to a face-touching Confederate, they were more likely to touch their own face compared to control conditions. Now, to take it one step further to try to look into what is the social function of mimicry, they did a follow-up study where the Confederates, again, got to know participants in a getting to know you task, but this time the Confederates were told to either mimic or not mimic the participants. And what they found was that when participants were mimicked by Confederates, they ended up liking the Confederate a lot more, rating them as someone they maybe want to be friends with, and they also said that the interaction went a lot more smoothly. Across a huge range of studies now, social mimicry has been found to be a really quick and powerful way to get two people to like each other. In fact, in new getting to know you exercises, about 40% of the variability in whether or not people like each other can be attributed to pure social mimicry. So apparently mimicry is something that we're born with, is deeply set in our brain, i.e. these mirror neurons, we do it automatically. But also it signals to other people when we mimic them that, hey, I like you, I'm agreeing with you, we can maybe work together on something. It gives the other people a sense of camaraderie and rapport that can be really quickly established, sometimes even in the first 15 seconds of meeting someone. Social mimicry is a really powerful tool for getting people to like you, and so it's no surprise that among therapists, teachers, bosses, the people who get the highest evaluations from their coworkers, students, and clients are those who automatically mimic them. So in this way, if you have a boss who whenever they talk to you, talks in your vocalizations and copies your body postures, you're more likely to like your boss, comply with them, and be a good worker. Same thing goes with clients and therapists. Of course, most therapists, bosses, teachers, and so on don't know that the reason why their clients and coworkers are so compliant is because they are unconsciously mimicking them, but it's such a powerful effect that this makes them get really good evaluations and really good outcomes from those that they work with. So in this way, if you really want someone to instantly trust you, try to take on their body posture, maybe even their vocal pattern. So if you enter into an interaction and someone is maybe seated very upright, maybe seat upright yourself. If they're talking fast, talk a little faster yourself. Little things like that of social mimicry help to signal to other people that, hey, we're alike. I like you, and hopefully you'll like me. Now, of course, with any behavior that engenders this much psychological impact, it can be used for not such beneficial causes as well. So marketers and advertisers have figured out that if you really want to sell someone on something, you need to mimic them to create that fast sense of trust and rapport. One recent study tested the power of mimicry in actual retail stores. In this case, they went up to clerks and randomly assigned them to either mimic customers, their bodily and vocal patterns, or to not mimic customers at all. And what they found was that when customers were mimicked, they tended to buy about 75% more items and were about equally 75% more likely to buy exactly what the clerk suggested to them. So in this way, the clerk had a lot more power in getting customers to buy more expensive items. And not only that, but when the customers walked away, they took an outside survey and they found that customers, when they were mimicked, rated the employees as being more skilled and personable and also gave higher ratings to the stores themselves. So when the sales clerks mimicked customers, the customers walked away spending a lot more money, but actually being happier about their whole experience. A similar study in Holland with bartenders, waiters, and waitresses found that when they mimicked just the vocal patterns of customers, they were able to get 50% more tips, and their tips were about 50% larger. So in this way, by socially mimicking someone, they were able to quickly build up a rapport with customers and thus get more tips for their service. So across a lot of these studies, they basically find that if you mimic people, they tend to trust you more, they tend to like you more, and they might also be more willing to buy things from you. Social mimicry is such a powerful and completely automatic behavior that we're actually more likely to buy something if we first see someone else buy it. So one study that examined that effect placed Confederates in railway cars in Germany where they had pretzel concession stands on board. And they found that if they had a Confederate walk up to the concession stand and buy a pretzel right at the beginning of a trip, the concession stands for pretzels literally doubled. And when asked afterward, why did you buy that pretzel? Everyday people would all come up with their own reasons. Well, I just felt like eating one, sounded good, smelled good. But none of them said, I bought the pretzel because I saw someone else doing it. So it's one of those things that we tend to mimic even consumer behaviors of others without even realizing it. Taking advantage of these social effects, marketers are creating whole new fields of advertising, sometimes called undercover or covert marketing. In this case, actual companies pay actors to walk streets of cities like New York, LA, Chicago to model consumer behavior, perhaps to make big high-end purchases in a very conspicuous way at stores, or simply to walk around with high-end clothing, electronics, or other goods. In fact, to guarantee that they can get a good conversation going with people on the street, some companies have even gone so far as to hire a few actors, one to pose and model and walk down the street with dresses and high-end electronics, another to come up acting as a stranger and saying something like, wow, that dress looks really good on you. Where'd you get it? Or, oh, that's a really interesting cell phone. What kind of features does it have? How much is that per month? And to conspicuously advertise to people who pass by without them even knowing that they're being marketed to. In fact, BlackBerry recently did this with some of their phones where they paid actresses to walk around New York City and ask strangers to take pictures of them while they were on vacation. So when the strangers would take a picture of them, they would of course talk about the wonderful photo quality of the phones, all the other features of the phones, and wow, did you know it's only $50 a month? So in this way, people were again being marketed to by actors on the street without ever realizing it. This form of stealth marketing has even found its way online. Recently, it was exposed through a leaked memo that Microsoft had been paying Machinima, who's a producer of online videos about video games, to put up positive videos about the Xbox One and their games. And so Machinima not only produced these videos, which appeared to be just regular players extolling the virtues of Xbox One, but also Microsoft paid people to go onto the video message boards and again post positive comments about Xbox. When this was uncovered, Microsoft and Machinima cut the contract and both apologized to fans, but who knows how many of these contracts are going on still just outside of public awareness. Many websites and social networking sites fully admit to making a lot of money through this type of undercover advertising. BuzzFeed, for example, is among the top 10 news and entertainment websites on the internet. And it recently made about $120 million in one fiscal year off of this type of covert advertising. They post what they call sponsored content, which is basically just blogs and videos that are paid for by marketers, but often contain only hidden product placements. So in this way, if you click on a video that, for example, is listed as, you won't believe how cute this kitten is, or actually this is a real one, 14 places you have to poop at before you die. Actually, I'm probably going to read that one later. You might not notice that subtle product placements are placed throughout this whole blog or video, and that then when you send it off to your friend or family member, because you want them to see it, you're actually sending off secret marketing messages to them. Over the years, marketers and advertising execs have had to continually reinvent the wheel of marketing. That's because whenever they come up with a new technique, such as consumer surveys, so the whole thing of like 4 out of 5 dentists agree, blah, 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 or things like product placements in movies, these have a power for a while, and then people become savvy to them, ignore them, and then they're not effective anymore. But marketers in recent years, when they've uncovered this whole covert marketing scheme, may have uncovered something that so deeply gets into the very recesses of our brain, our mirror neuron actions, that they're really almost impossible to ignore. So for example, studies show that even if people are fully aware that a Confederate has been told to mimic them, they tend to still like that Confederate more than if they don't mimic them. So in this way, even if we totally know that someone is placating us by maybe imitating our vocal patterns or bodily movements, we almost can't help but to like them. It's so deep within our brains. Also, even if people are told directly to mimic someone else, even that mimicry, even though it's totally forced, usually again causes things like increased rapport and trust of the person being mimicked. So again, it works both ways, even if we're completely knowledgeable about what's going on. So in this way, advertisers may have discovered something that is so ingrained in our heads, basically the powers of social mimicry, that we'd be hard to resist it even if we completely knew that it was going on. Mimicry is built so much into our brains that it might be a foolproof way to also get into our hearts, and also maybe even our wallets.
You know, and then it just kind of all started to make sense. Yeah. And I'm not really liking what this is doing, but I mean, you know, it's just like this, you know. Yeah. It's just, I don't know what I'm doing here. I mean, like, I don't know any of this, but, you know, it's just...
Brilliant.